We all have those certain sacred dishes. The odd guilty pleasure that is so deeply tied to our psyche that it almost becomes part of who we are. I'm talking about childhood meals that if we looked at them as objective adults, they might seem a bit strange. So, beanie weenies, pizza rolls, corn dogs, tater tots, grilled cheese and tomato soup, hamburger helper, meatloaf, and if you grew up in the Anglosphere outside of the States, bangers and mash, toad in the hole, fish and chips, beans on toast, fairy bread. So for those who didn't grow up eating those foods, that list may sound like literal nonsense. But if you had those in your childhood, one of two things likely happened. One, you may have gotten a little bit hungry, or two, it may have triggered some psychological response, as you recalled memories and emotions tied to these dishes, both good and bad. For anyone who grew up in the Soviet Union still alive today, these magical childhood meals are likely either buckwheat or kotleti. Kotleti are small, pan-fried meat patties that can be made in large batches. They became incredibly popular in the Soviet Union when the quality and freshness of the meat could be a bit suspect. People needed an easy dish that could be made using any high-fat ground meat and supplemented with filler material like breadcrumbs or stale bread. So you can think of this as sort of a half-portion mini baby meatloaf. And, I mean, who doesn't have a positive memory of mom making meatloaf?
You hungry? Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf? You know what? I will have some meatloaf. Let's have some meatloaf. You want some? Yes. I knew you'd come. Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
As with most childhood foods, this is not something that's given a lot of intellectual thought. It's seen as a cultural staple and not really something worth celebrating. And while the quality may have been questionable during the hard times of the Soviet Union, what's available today means that everyone loves kotleti, regardless of taste, age, or economic status. And I can guarantee you that you and your kids will love this little mini baby meatloaf.
Here as well. Now, who would still eat this?
So get ready to plant the seeds of future nostalgia as I teach you how to make this classic Soviet dish. Because today, we're making kotleti. You can make kotleti with almost any ground meat. Turkey, chicken, even fish. But today we will use a mixture of pork and beef. We will use 500 grams, or about a pound of pork, and 500 grams of beef as a base for the dish. If you want to Soviet cosplay this dish, the meat would have to be ground at home using a hand-cranked meat grinder called a мясорубка. But thankfully we live in a world where we can get decent ground meat at any shop. At least for now. Traditionally, the filler ingredient is dried or stale bread that has been soaked in milk. So I have about 300 grams of aged bread that I will soak in milk. However, if this is a bridge too far, you can just use breadcrumbs. While the bread soaks, we will chop the onion. The onion is traditionally grated into a paste, like with deruni. But since I think my knife skills are slightly better than a Soviet grandmother, I will finely dice them instead of pureeing them, because I really prefer the flavor and texture of diced onions in kotleti. If you don't like the texture, or aren't a big fan of onions, just blitz or grate them into a paste. Also, crush several cloves of garlic. Just a side note, oh my god, this is the biggest single clove of garlic I've ever seen in my life. What is that? Is this Chernobyl garlic? It's insane. Oh well. Then you will, and this is going to be one of the weirdest sentences I've ever said aloud, physically wring out the milk from the stale bread and remove the crust or any part that remains firm, and add the softened, milk-moistened bread to the meat mixture. Mix the ground meat, onions, garlic, rehydrated bread, salt and pepper, and 2 to 3 beaten eggs. Make sure you mix this part by hand and check that the consistency of the mixture is uniform. If you feel any firm bits of bread or larger pieces of onion, remove them. Do not mix in a food processor. If you do, you will overmix the meat and your kotleti will be dense and chewy instead of light and juicy.
Oh my God, it's so juicy!
Once mixed, you will shape the mini meatloafs into thick, egg-shaped patties. Or into whatever shape your heart tells you to make. You're an adult. Who am I to tell you what to do? After you have shaped them, you will pan fry them on medium-high. Be sure not to cook them too hot, because we want to brown them on the outside, but not burn them, while cooking through the meat in the middle. Make sure not to overcrowd the pan and put the lid on while cooking the first side. Cook for a few minutes, then flip, and cook the other side with the lid off. Now you should have a mountain of these baby meatloafs that you can eat immediately or use throughout the week. Just pop them into the microwave and reheat them. They keep for a surprisingly long time and taste just as good now or 3 days after you make them. Traditionally, these are served with potatoes in whatever fashion you fancy, but personally, I think they go great with fluffy mash. I also love them with a lovely cucumber and tomato salad. So there you have it, a childhood classic and a beloved dish of many people from the former Soviet republics. I hope you guys enjoy this and give it a try at home. Until next time, thanks guys.
Oh my God, it's so juicy!